Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Extremely excited to record this video, which is going to be a mini series here on the channel where I'm going to talk about the best futures in the NBA. It's going to be a two-part series. I'm also going to talk about the worst futures in an upcoming video as well. And you might be saying, why is this a series? I'll explain that in just a second. If you guys are new to Utility Sports, make sure to, first of all, leave a like, then subscribe to the channel for more content. You don't want to miss out on future uploads here where I cover the NBA draft. I cover all 30 NBA teams nationally. A lot of work and time goes into these videos. So show some of that appreciation for the consistent uploads and posts. Put a lot of work into this. I really love chatting hoops with you guys. Make sure you join that Discord. Links in the description as well for that. Without further ado, let's jump into that video preview. I'm going to explain exactly what I meant with a mini series here, but in this video I'm going to talk about 10 different NBA teams with the best futures ranked. Now there's a lot of things that play into that. This becomes a very subjective list because of that. So hear me out first. When you see a team ranked, especially your favorite team, maybe your favorite team isn't even ranked in this video. My favorite team isn't ranked in this video. So hear me out first, then come to your own conclusions. I don't want you guys to just blindly agree with me or just solely expect everything I say to be perfect. It won't be, to be completely honest with you. I want you guys to civilly disagree with me. Argue in good faith and in good disagreements. Hear me out. Hear my viewpoints, and then also present your own. This is a community. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. And remember, I'm recording this before the draft and before free agency, which is why this is a two-part series. I'm also going to record this same video after the draft, after free agency, and we're going to be able to kind of see how things have shifted. Some things are going to happen that I don't expect. Maybe I don't love a team's draft picks they make in this year's class. Maybe I do love picks that they make or some free agents they're able to bring in, and it completely changes the outlook of that organization, which is why this is going to be, again, a two-part series. We're also going to look at the young prime talent, so it's not just about teams that are 18, 19, 20 years old. We're going to talk about teams that have 25, 26-year-old superstars that project to be really great over the next 7 years and have the surrounding infrastructure to make them a top 10 future still. Even if they've won in the past, that does not really factor into this list, although it does point to them likely being able to continue winning. So I will talk about that. The new CBA ramifications will play in. I do think one team has a significant advantage over everybody else. I will be recording an individual video on that at some point. We're going to talk about access to draft picks. That matters a lot for these teams' futures, not only in terms of what talent they're going to add in via the draft, but also trade flexibility. All of that stuff matters a ton. And then remember, my viewpoint here is roughly over the next 5 to 7 years. Some teams in here are best suited to win over the next 1 to 3 years. Some of them are suited to win 5 to 7 years from now. So it's a hard thing to balance. How do you compare a rebuilding team's future to a team that's presently ready to win right now? That's a very difficult thing to assess. So I tried my best in here. Again, this is not going to be a perfect list. It's a very subjective list. I want to hear your guys' thoughts as well in the comment section. Disagree with me civilly. Share your opinions and thoughts. Don't just call me an idiot. That's what happened last year. People were very upset at me. Okay, sometimes maybe I am an idiot, but I do want to hear your guys' thoughts civilly in the comment section. Here's my 10th team, though, the Washington Wizards. And this is probably one of those surprise ones to you. The Wizards were extremely bad this past season, but I do like their long-term outlook quite a bit. I think that they are moving in the right direction. The reason they're as low as they are in this video at number 10 for me, there was a lot of stuff that they had to fix already in the last 12 months, and I think they're a ways away from winning yet at this point, which is okay. And I think that's very good for Washington because they were, prior to Michael Winger and Will Dawkins taking really their now current roles with the Wizards as president of basketball operations and GM, the Wizards were kind of stuck in mediocrity, where they had Bradley Beal on a huge, ginormous contract, no trade clause. They had Kristaps Porzingis, who's a very good player, but wasn't going to help Washington really reach the heights that they wanted to. And with those two guys on the roster, they were ultimately too good to really bottom out. 1 year removed from that, they were able to get value for Bradley Beal. I was shocked by that trade, and I firmly said that the Wizards won that trade. I was one of the few people in the universe who actually believed that at the time, and 12 months from then, I look very correct in that analysis. Then you also look at what they were able to do with the Porzingis trade, getting him to opt into a contract, ultimately sending him to Boston. It helped the Celtics out, it helped Porzingis out, but it also did give Washington an extra asset to work with in trading him, which worked out pretty well. They also brought in Tyus Jones that way. They've opened up some flexibility themselves by moving Porzingis rather than just letting him walk in free agency for nothing. Then last draft, I think they nailed it with the Bilal Coulibaly pick. They moved up one spot to ensure that they got him. They have 12 second-round picks over the next few years. They were able to pick up an extra first-round pick in this year's draft. So they have the 26th pick from the Dallas Mavericks trading Daniel Gafford. They also have the second overall pick from just bottoming out. And this is where the benefit for Washington comes in long-term. They have all of these future picks that they're going to make themselves, similar to what OKC did when Oklahoma City bottomed out. And listen, Will Dawkins was right there in the center of that rebuild, working under Sam Presti. He knows how this has to work. You have to bottom out. You have to be a team that doesn't win a lot of games in order to set yourself up for draft luck and draft lottery luck. The Wizards have already gotten a small taste of it in this year's draft, second overall. Maybe that turns into Alex Sarr. Maybe it's Zachary Reese-Shea. Could be Donovan Clingan. Regardless, they're going to get a foundational piece, not someone who's going to be a superstar, not the face of their franchise, but a key, essential cog in the machine for Washington. As they go into the 2025 draft, they're going to be able to add more talent even. Maybe they'll be the team that lands Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey or Nolan Traore. There's a lot of really good talent in next year's draft. Dylan Harper as well, VJ Edgecombe. There's a bunch of prospects that Washington's going to have their eyes on. They're going to be really focused on scouting and developing talent. I think they're really moving in the right direction. And the other thing I like is they do have some current talent on roster that they could either trade or keep as role players around the young talent that ultimately comes in through draft classes. Denny Avdia, who's pictured on the graphic here, one of the best contracts in the NBA. He's on a descending contract over the next 4 years. Really, really solid player. Can handle the basketball, can dribble, pass, and shoot. Some of the obvious fundamental skills of offensive basketball on the perimeter. Denny Avdia checks a lot of those boxes. He pushes in transition well. He's also a pretty good point of attack defender. I think one of the more underrated elements to his game. You have him on a descending deal. I think that's extremely valuable whether you trade him or keep him long term. Kyle Kuzma's on a descending deal. That's an easy route for the Wizards to likely land another first round pick over the next couple of years if they do decide to move him. The Wizards, I like their core infrastructure right now of young players. I like Corey Kispert as a role player. I like Denny Avdia as a high-quality role player. I think Bilal Coulibaly has some real untapped potential yet that he could blossom into and turn into a real dynamic two-way player. And then they're going to load up with draft picks. So the Wizards, they are a ways away from winning. But I think if everything goes right and if they make a lot of smart decisions, which I ultimately do trust Michael Winger and Will Dawkins to do, the Wizards are a team that 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about them as a really dangerous threat in the Eastern Conference, which is why I'm very high on their long-term upside. Number 9, I have the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm not really accustomed to talking about the Charlotte Hornets as one of those teams with a really bright future, but the ownership change from Michael Jordan to Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin has completely transformed the way that this Hornets team looks internally, the way that their front office operates. They've had a real facelift to the organization over the last 6 to 8 months, and I think as a result of that, I'm a lot more optimistic about the direction and the future of the Charlotte Hornets than I ever have been in my entire life. And the reason is, again, the figureheads, the people at the top of the pyramid, I think are really smart. I think they're really trying to run their organization to win long term, and with some of their foundational building block pieces. And LaMelo Ball, if he ever stays healthy, could be one of the 5 to 10 best point guards in the NBA any given season. He shoots the ball really well, has a lot of playmaking feel, great positional size. They have Brandon Miller, who had a fantastic rookie season, someone who in his draft class I said had all NBA type potential as a wing. Looked at him as a likely all-star wing. Getting him is a really good selection, a really strong player. Obviously, I wanted them to go in a different direction. I still think that they are short on playmaking. Another ball handler I think would go a long ways there in Charlotte. They have obvious needs to fix, but what they've done since the ownership change is acquire draft assets. They traded PJ Washington for a 2027 first from the Dallas Mavericks. That could become an extremely valuable asset. You never know what the Mavericks are going to look like 3 years from now. They also got a draft pick from Miami in 2027 for Terry Rozier. They have completely reshaped their team. They traded Gordon Hayward, got some pieces in there, including Trey Mann from Oklahoma City. They got Vasi Micic. This team just looks a lot different than they did 12 months ago, and I think the ownership change specifically is what gives me a lot of belief and confidence in the direction of this organization. Now, the job's not finished. They're not even close to finished yet. They have to hit on draft picks. They have the 6th pick in this year's draft. They have a lot of upcoming selections that they're going to have to hit on and really find ways to maneuver, because they're still, again, not out of the weeds yet. They're not a team that's poised to win currently, so I'm putting a lot of faith in them to figure it out long term. That is a risk on my part, but I do think with their overall recency in decision making and some of the moves that they've made as of late, I do believe in the direction of this organization. I have them with the 9th best future because I like their cornerstone pieces. I like the extra draft assets they were able to bring in. I like their long-term flexibility, and because of that, I think they're going to be able to build a winning culture and a winning program there in Charlotte. Moving on to team number 8, I have the Indiana Pacers, who just made a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Unfortunately, got swept by the Boston Celtics. No shame in that. The Celtics were a great team, ended up winning the NBA Finals, and Indiana pushed them in a lot of those games. And I think that's a real testament to not only the top-end talent, because Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, both incredible players, but even when Halliburton got hurt, the Pacers' depth really showed its strength and its might in that series, as they did all season long. Before the year, I said the Pacers were one of the deepest teams. I've talked about them as a team with 11, 12 actual quality NBA players. That is extremely rare, very difficult to find. But not only do they have those types of players, that really great depth, they have them on a lot of affordable contracts. Aaron Nesmith, pictured on the graphic for a reason. He's on one of the best contracts in the NBA, in my opinion. Below the mid-level exception, if I'm not mistaken, and someone who has a lot of years on his deal yet. I think 2 or 3 more years after this season that just ended. So Aaron Nesmith, I think, just a great exemplar of what Indiana's been able to do on the margins of their roster, finding talent. Basically, Boston gave up on Aaron Nesmith when they traded for Malcolm Brogdon. Nesmith ended up becoming a huge hit for Indiana as a 3-and-D wing. Miles Turner, I think, is a huge cheat code for their offensive dynamism, especially his pick and pop game with Tyrese Halliburton. One of the biggest advantages Indiana has is their ability to create open shots consistently. That comes as a byproduct of their point guard, Tyrese Halliburton, being such a selfless player. It really spreads to the rest of the team, in my opinion. But what also is a real cause for that is the type of personnel they have. They have a lot of shooting. They have a lot of guys who just play the game the right way. TJ McConnell's a really good pace pusher. Andrew Nembhard is capable of creating off the bounce himself. Now, I do think Indiana, one thing that I'm still waiting for them to do, even after the Pascal Siakam trade, they have trade flexibility after this draft. They only owe 1 future first-round pick out the door to the Raptors in that Siakam deal, because 2 of their 3 firsts were in this year's draft. I think that was a genius trade for Indiana. One thing that I do think is going to ultimately happen for them, though, at some point in time, is a trade for another star. And that's where having those valuable contracts, those good role players on middling deals, becomes extremely valuable, because with their draft picks in hand, with all of these collection of players, I haven't even talked about Benedict Mathurin yet, Jalen Smith, Obi Toppin will likely re-sign there in Indiana. It feels like a foregone conclusion to me that Pascal Siakam will re-sign in Indiana. The Pacers are going to have wiggle room to make other trades and to really upgrade other areas of their roster. One of the strong benefits of their team was, again, their depth. I think one of the big questions is their starting lineup good enough? Are they good enough to compete with a New York Knicks team? Obviously, they beat the Knicks, but the Knicks were really banged up and not healthy, and it still took a lot for Indiana to get that series over and done with. I think for the Pacers specifically, it's about trying to upgrade their number 3 player, or even their second best player. If they're going to make Pascal Siakam the 3rd best player on the roster, who is that second guy? Are they able to go out and get that player in a sign and trade? Are they able to go out and get him at the trade deadline somehow, some way? They're going to have the flexibility to do that. I think the Pacers are one big move away from really turning themselves into a true title contender. One more elite scorer, preferably on the wing, with your starting front court being Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, and player X. You're going to have a really dangerous unit, a really dangerous group, and if they're able to keep some of their depth pieces around that, like an Aaron Nesmith, like a TJ McConnell, the Pacers are going to be cooking with gas. They're a dangerous team. I really like their future. This is a hard exercise because I like the future of all of these teams. I especially think from 8 to 1, it's really hard to pick, because Indiana's a team I could see winning an NBA Finals if they make the right moves within the next 2 or 3 years. That's extremely high praise. I'm not guaranteeing that they will, but I could see that happening if they make the right moves in that timeline, because I like the way Halliburton plays. I like Siakam's fit there, and I think Miles Turner is a cheat code at center offensively. So because of that, I do like Indiana's future quite a bit. Moving on to my 7th team here, and that is the Orlando Magic, who I am quite high on as well long term. Now, I know some people are going to say, whoa, you actually have the Magic quite low for a team that was just the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Extremely young, a lot of young talent. I love their young talent, by the way. I really like Jalen Suggs. I really like Anthony Black. We didn't get to see a ton of him in the playoffs especially, but I do think he factors in long-term extremely well. Jonathan Isaac's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. From a defensive standpoint, the guy's just an absolute monster. Probably the only true player in the league that can guard 1 through 5 on any given night. And the Magic have some real offensive dynamism between Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner on the wings. Now, a lot of people got really low on Franz Wagner this year. His jump shot just wasn't super consistent. I'm holding my stock in him. I think he's going to be a tremendous player still going forward. I think he's going to be worth that rookie max extension that Orlando will presumably sign him to at some point in time. And that's really the big concern I have here for Orlando. It's go time right now for them. And that's a scary thing because your team's not really, I think, ready to hit on the accelerator quite yet. I still think that maybe they're a year away from seeing exactly everything that they need because Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner are still very early in their development. They're going to take steps forward. But one of the issues with that, as they have cap space presently, they're not going to be able to have cap space 2-3 years from now after signing Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs to rookie extensions at some point. They're going to run out of money to continue improving and upgrading their roster. So that makes this offseason an extremely important one for Orlando to find those upgrades currently, to find those guys right now that can really step in and help them. And this is why after free agency, after the draft, if Orlando's aggressive and I like the moves that they make, they could shoot all the way up to maybe number 2, number 3, number 4 on this list because I do like their current collection of talent. And if they add in someone like a DeJounte Murray or an Anthony Simons, a shot-creating guard who can handle and take some of the pressure off of both Banchero and Wagner to be the sole creators of their offense while providing like good spacing when those two guys have the ball. Someone like Simons, who's a really good shot creator, a really good three-point shooter, or DeJounte Murray, one of the better pull-up shooters in the NBA. Those two guys make a ton of sense to me for Orlando. It probably will come with a steep price, but the Magic have access to their own draft picks. They have a lot of flexibility. They also have that Denver Nuggets 2025 first-round pick, so they could afford to trade 2 or 3 first-rounders like Indiana did for Siakam and still keep a hold of a decent part of their future still in terms of their own draft picks as well. So the Magic, I really like their long-term direction. I like their long-term future. Paolo Banchero has proven himself to be a top 20-ish player in the world at this point in time. And the sky's the limit for his game. I think there's a lot of easy ways for him to continue improving. I think if he's able to get into a little bit better shape in terms of his quick first step, I think he just needs to slim down just a tiny little bit so he's a little bit quicker off the bounce. And if he's able to find ways to get to the rim instead of just stopping in the mid-range area for pull-up jump shots, that's when you're going to really see him take a huge step forward. And if Wagner and Banchero both improve as shooters as well, I think Orlando is going to be a really dangerous team. And if they add a point guard who can really score the ball and shoot it, they're going to be a real force to be reckoned with because I love the way Jamal Mosley coaches. I love their defensive scheme and identity, and I love the defensive talent that they have on roster as well, especially Suggs and Isaac, who I've already highlighted. This Magic team is just really, really good. They're really young. There's a lot of upside here, but I think that right now is the time to step on the gas for them, and you have to make the right move here. There's a lot of pressure, but I think after the trade deadline or after the free agency and after the draft, I could be much higher on this team's long-term future. Team number 6 is the Denver Nuggets for me. I do have the Nuggets still in here. Now, they're going to be a team that faces a lot of consequences here from the NBA CBA. They could potentially lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as early as this offseason. We'll see what happens with his contract. He has a player option for, I believe, $15 million. Very likely he could opt out of that. And ultimately, we would either see him sign for a lot more money in Denver or maybe even test free agency and get a big offer from some team with cap space this offseason. So that'll be a big test here for Denver, who already lost Bruce Brown last year. Are they able to retain KCP? They have a lot of money tied up to Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. There are some questions here, and Aaron Gordon, of course, as well. So Denver, I love their starting 5. They are very reliant right now on some young guys coming off the bench. You think Christian Brown, Peyton Watson. They've got a bunch more young guys in the weight too. Julian Strawther, Hunter Tyson. They have a draft pick this year at pick number 28. The Nuggets, I think, and Vlatko Čančar coming back too, I think is going to be a big deal for them. That's one of the more underrated return from injuries that no one's talking about right now. I think Čančar is going to actually be a really important piece for Denver, especially on his contract he's currently playing for. The Nuggets are a team that could win the championship again next season, which is why I have to show them that respect here. Having them 6th on my list, they are going to face a lot of CBA implications. There's going to be a lot of ramifications from their current contracts and cap table, but the reality is the talent is there. The two-man game between Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray is absolutely devastating. They pushed Minnesota to the wire. Obviously, the Wolves, who were pretty much built to beat Denver, they did come out on top, but it was a very close competitive series. If a few shots go differently in that one, maybe Denver walks into the NBA Finals, and I think you'd probably would have favored them over the Boston Celtics from the matchup. So it's a unique situation. I think Denver still a team that is really dangerous any given season. Now, they don't have a lot of their own flexibility. They don't have a lot of their own draft picks moving forward, which is why they're a little bit lower on my list, but you still have to respect them as a real title contender right now, which is why I have them firmly in my top 10. Now at number 5, and this is a team that I've been very, very high on for a long time, and I think people are starting to see the vision here with how recent drafts have gone and how this past season went when they finally added some veterans and got a real NBA head coach, someone who isn't Steven Silas. The Houston Rockets took a significant step forward. They won over 40 games this past year, and just an impressive season for them. Even though Alperen Şengün, their best player, got hurt at the end of the season, they were still able to find their rhythm, score the basketball effectively and efficiently enough to cater to their top 10 defense. And the upside is real here for Houston. The sky is the limit, so to speak, because I think Jalen Green, after becoming a dad, really started to showcase why he was a top 2 pick in his draft class back in 2021. He's an impressive player, someone who I think there's a lot of Devin Booker in his game. Now, I think the spacing there for Houston is one of the biggest limitations for him. They do have to find shooting, but I really like still the combination of Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün. And I think Ime Udoka, who instilled a fantastic defense in year 1 of his coaching tenure in Houston, I think going into next year, the emphasis is going to be on the offense, figuring out their spacing. One thing I didn't like, guys who were standing in the corner, they didn't stand in the deep corner. They actually hovered around the break. And I think making slight adjustments like that, opening the court just a little bit more, opening up your driving lanes just a hair more, I think will do a lot of wonders for their offense, making guys like Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün look even better just because there'd be a slight more amount of spacing on the court for them. And then you look at some of their young guys, Cam Whitmore, Amen Thompson, maybe one of the best rookie classes in recent memory. Drafting those two guys, Amen Thompson projects to be an absolute triple-double machine, someone I am still enamored with, one of the quickest, burstiest players in the NBA, and it's doing so at 6'7". He can guard across multiple positions. He's one of the best defensive rebounders already in the NBA. I think that's something that can translate to the offensive glass as well. He's just a proficient athlete and a mesmerizing talent to boot. Obviously, the jump shot's still a big question. I think he has to improve his handle, but I'm still very impressed and amazed with what Amen Thompson's capable of doing on the court. And then Cam Whitmore, my draft comp for him was Jaylen Brown. And, well, Jaylen Brown's now an NBA Finals MVP, and I think if you look at Cam Whitmore's rookie season, comparing it to Jaylen Brown's rookie season, the two of them were very eerily similar in terms of the amount of points they scored, the efficiency from the field. Obviously, the playmaking is still a big question for Cam Whitmore, like it was for Jaylen Brown. But I think if you surround someone like Cam Whitmore with the right talent, you're going to be able to get to the mountaintop at some point. And one of the biggest things for Houston, they still own all of the Brooklyn Nets' future for the most part. They are already seeing the benefits of that. They have pick 3 in this year's draft. Someone like Reed Shepherd could really move the needle for this team from a spacing perspective. And just getting more talent in the door over the next couple of years. I haven't even talked about Tari Eason yet. I haven't even talked about Jabari Smith Jr. yet. I love this team. I really love the Steven Adams addition. I think Houston has been really well built. I think that their collection of high draft picks are finally we're going to see them all mesh together at some point here in the next couple of years. And then people 2, 3, 4 years from now are going to say, oh my gosh, how did Houston get this good of a roster? And it's because they were patient through this process. They haven't traded any of their young guys yet. I hope that they keep the core 6 together while still implementing more talent in future drafts. This team is going to be loaded. They're going to be able to win a lot with this core. Now, it's going to get expensive pretty quickly, but Houston, I think, is in a position with all of their draft picks. Is one of the things I favor about them over Orlando. They just are going to have better draft picks. Orlando got so good so quickly, they're going to lose out on having top 10 picks. Houston, would be, thanks to the Brooklyn Nets, are going to continue to have an influx of top 10 picks over the next couple of years. Whether they use that to make draft picks or to make trades, that's up to them, but they're going to have a lot of flexibility, and they're going to be able to continue improving this team rather rapidly. Now at number 4, I have the New York Knicks, a team that was very, very close to being a true title contender this year. Unfortunately, injuries got in the way, and that is one of my biggest concerns here for a Tom Thibodeau team. Will this team ever stay healthy or be healthy come postseason time? You look at Julius Randle, his play style obviously struggles a bit in the postseason as well. He's just going to be prone to injuries a bit with the physicality he plays with. Obviously, he's a really tough player, plays through injuries at times, but that is going to be a limiting factor for New York come postseason time. But if you look at New York, how thin they were this postseason, how many key players were out of their lineup, they were still a really tough out. They beat Philadelphia. They pushed Indiana super deep in the second round to get to the conference finals. Ultimately, they didn't get the job done, but Jalen Brunson is a legitimate top 10 player in the world. There's no question about that. The trade for OG Anunoby was genius. I expect him to be back in New York going forward. I would be shocked if he signed somewhere else, to be honest. Julius Randle could either be a huge trade chip. The Knicks have a ton of draft picks to trade from as well. They're a huge market. Players would be interested in going there to play with Jalen Brunson. But worst case, if they just keep Julius Randle, I love their roster construction right now. They're loaded with players who fit Tom Thibodeau's style of coaching. Aggressive, physical, really well-conditioned team. A team that plays the game the right way. They win 50-50 balls a ton. Honestly, 50-50 balls become 70-30 balls when you're facing the New York Knicks because they seemingly get on almost all of them. Josh Hart is a winning player. Dante DiVincenzo is a winning player. They have those two guys on very good contracts. And then you also look at, Isaiah Hartenstein. That's one of their big questions this free agency cycle. Are they going to be able to keep him? My assumption is yes. I love their center room with both Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks are loaded. They've got a great 8, 9, 10-man rotation. They have Bojan Bogdanovic's contract to trade this offseason as well. They've got 2 first-round picks in 2024. They've got a lot of flexibility. This team is going to be around the top of the Eastern Conference for the next half-decade or so at least. And I think at some point, maybe they turn some of those draft picks and trade chips into a bona fide top 5 player in the world. And if they do that, if they're able to pull that off at some point in time, Jalen Brunson, Player X, and Tom Thibodeau, as long as they're healthy, are going to be a real threat to win a title or multiple over the next couple of years, which is why I'm so high on their future. Number 3, I have the San Antonio Spurs, and it really boils down to one guy, Victor Wembanyama. They have a player who I think can be the best player in the world in short order. He's one of the freakiest players to ever play the game. Standing at 7'5", he has all of the skill in the world. If you're trying to build an offense through a center, you would want someone with Victor Wembanyama's skill set, the ability to push the ball in transition, handle the rock, play make, both off of a live dribble and out of stationary situations. He's a shooter now. He's an incredible talent offensively. And then from the defensive side, unlike a Nikola Jokic where you take all of the offensive skill and maybe you're not the most athletic, maybe you're not the best rim protector, well, Wembanyama projects to be probably the best rim protector in the NBA for the next 10 years. He projects to be someone who probably wins 4, 5, 6 Defensive Players of the Year, which is crazy to say because 4 is the all-time record. It's a 3-way tie between Dikembe Mutombo, Ben Wallace, and Rudy Gobert. Victor Wembanyama is going to shatter some of those records. He's going to be the best player in the world in very short order, in my opinion, in my estimation. I've been saying this for a long time. You go back to my draft evaluation last year on him. The entire time I would spend 3-4 minutes at the beginning of every mock draft talking about Wembanyama's greatness. People were getting tired of me saying all of that because they were saying, we already know Wemby's going to be the first pick. Why do you spend so much time talking about him? It's because he's a generational, can't miss, unbelievable prospect. And San Antonio, who has a lot of questions right now, he is the answer for all of them. He is that good. He is that great of a talent. I like some of their surrounding talent. Devin Vassell, I've been very high on since his time at Florida State. I do think Jeremy Sohan is a quality NBA player. Did not start last year very well with them trying to play him at point guard, but once he kind of resettled back into his natural position and role, I started to see a lot better stuff from Sohan. And I think the Spurs, who have a lot of draft picks over the next couple of years, including 2 in the top 10 in this year's draft at pick 4 and pick 8, have some real flexibility in how they want to build their roster, and it's going to shape how I feel about them. For me, I want them to surround Wembanyama with scoring upside. I want them to surround him with shooting and playmaking, and I think someone like Rob Dillingham makes a ton of sense there, but I could also see them looking at the upside of drafting guys with great physical profiles. Someone like Stephon Castle, who's a huge point guard who can guard across multiple positions. That gives you some real defensive versatility. Someone like Tidjane Salaün, who's also French, could make a good deal of sense for the Spurs at pick number 8 in this year's draft if they're looking for the long-term upside, the athletic profile that he has, and how you could match up with teams like Minnesota, Denver, Oklahoma City. You'd have a real advantage there with some of that size. So getting players like Tidjane Salaün and Stephon Castle from a physical standpoint does make some sense, but I do want them to value shooting, because if you have a dynamic point guard who can come off screens and shoot the ball on dribble pull-ups, it puts a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. Are you going to leave Wembanyama's body as the roll man? If so, that seems like a very, very bad choice. It's going to lead to a lot of open shots for good shooters if the Spurs value that. I think someone like Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, if he falls to 4, those guys could make a good deal of sense as well. So I'm really excited for the Spurs' future. It all starts and ends with Victor Wembanyama, his presence as arguably going as one of the best players maybe ever to play when it's all said and done, because he is that good of a talent. He is huge. He moves his feet so well. He's just an impressive prodigy of a player, and I'm extremely excited about his future and the Spurs' future in general moving forward with their picks in this year's draft, the access to other teams' picks over the next couple of years as well. They have some pick swaps with other teams. I'm extremely excited about San Antonio. I think 3 might be a little low, and depending on how this draft goes for them, I could really be ecstatic about their long-term future depending on who they decide to pick and who they don't select. Pick number 2, or not pick number 2, excuse me. Team number 2 here, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it really starts and ends with their big 3. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the head of the snake, a true MVP caliber player, finished second in MVP voting this year. I would have probably had him third on my own ballot behind Luka Doncic, but ultimately for OKC, he is such a good player, and he completely embodies their playstyle, a drive and kick warrior, a team that can really space you out. And I think the biggest question for Oklahoma City over the next 2 to 3 years, how do they make other teams guard Chet Holmgren with their centers? And you might say, okay, well, that's very specific. Why is that the big question? In the playoffs, we saw teams hide their centers on Josh Giddey. We saw teams at times put their centers on Lou Dort, and some of the more hesitant or non-shooting type players for OKC. The Thunder as a team shot the ball extremely well, but they are a hesitant group of shooters. They're not going to go out there and shoot 45 threes as a team, most prominently. They kind of hovered around 33, 34 threes per game this past year. I think if they really want to open up their team, if they really want to open up their offense specifically, you put shooters on the floor, you make other teams have to put their centers on Chet Holmgren, just like how I talked about with Indiana, having a cheat code center in Miles Turner, where their pick and pop game is just so dynamic and so much of a threat. Imagine Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being able to attack downhill, and the other team scared about the pick and pop game with Chet Holmgren if he continues to develop as a shooter and continues to improve his not only efficiency on those shots, but also the volume. The Thunder could be a really dynamic offense, and obviously they have a whole bunch of great individual defenders. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets in the passing lanes. He's extremely disruptive on the ball as well. Someone who is just a pickpocket maestro at times. Jalen Williams has been asked to guard up and down lineups a lot. He's guarded players like Karl Anthony Towns. He's guarded point guards. He's guarded wings. He's guarded everybody. So his defensive versatility is extremely important for them. Obviously, you could also point to some of the deficiencies they have when it comes to rebounding. Finding a 4-man could be really important for them too, who's athletic. But again, you don't want to get an interior center because it just gives other teams' bigs a place to hide, a place to sit, and it would really disrupt the way OKC plays in their drive and kick game. They like their spacing. They like giving Shai Gilgeous-Alexander opportunities to attack in isolation, beat one-on-one matchups off the dribble, put teams into rotation, kick the ball out and shoot the ball, attack closeouts. Those are things OKC does all extremely well right now. It's just about finding the surrounding talent necessary to force teams into bad matchups. And one of those, again, the real message I want to share here, the biggest matchup advantage OKC has is Chet Holmgren being an elite rim protector and a shooting big man. that is such a rare combination in the league. There's only so many players that can play that style at the center and do it extremely well. Chet Holmgren is in that very short list, and with that, I think OKC just really needs to find a way to surround this core nucleus, this trio specifically on the graphic, with quality, consistent shooters, guys who still can play both ends of the floor. That's very tough to find, but OKC has so many draft picks. They have so many young, good players right now. They have all the trade flexibility in the world. At some point, Sam Presti's going to have to push this team toward winning and not just look at stockpiling draft picks for the next 10 years again. He has to, at some point, find the right talent. Someone like Lauri Markkanen would have been tremendous. That's the team, that's the player I think if OKC went out and got, they would be one of the favorites to win the NBA title next season, because I think this core young group is very ready. They made the second round of the playoffs in their first real playoff run. Obviously, J-Dub and Chet Holmgren at times did look a little shocked by how the playoffs play, but I do think that they are ready, especially going into next year with some playoff experience under their belt. You get a win-now player. For me, the biggest example is Lauri Markkanen, and if you go get that guy, you're going to be a really dangerous threat because you're adding another huge body into the mix. He's someone who plays off the catch extremely well. Go get Lauri Markkanen. Don't look back. You put yourself in a prime position to maybe win a championship within the next 2-3 years. I'm very excited about OKC's future, as you should be as well. Then the best future in the NBA, in my opinion, is the Boston Celtics, who are your 2024 NBA champions. But that's not the sole reason they're on this list. It's not just because they just won right now. It's because they're slated to win multiple more times over the next couple of years. I want to remind people, I was one of the few voices saying, do not break up the Jays after every playoff shortcoming. People every single time got tired of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum coming up just a little bit short. The issue, though, is you guys were judging them as 23, 22-year-olds, 24, 25-year-olds. They are finally hitting their prime. And the moment that they did that, they won an NBA Finals. This duo is so good together. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. This is what the Clippers envisioned having when they traded for Paul George and signed Kawhi Leonard. They wanted two apex elite dominant wings. The Celtics have that. These two guys play a lot of games. They have great chemistry together. They've matured. They've grown out of the your turn, my turn, your team, my team, any of that nonsense. Jaylen Brown was your conference finals MVP and finals MVP. Jason Tatum, still extremely happy and still extremely satisfied. Remember a year ago, everyone was saying, oh my gosh, Jaylen Brown overpaid. I was one of the few people saying Boston had no other choice. This was the no-brainer decision for them. Less than 12 months later, he's the NBA Finals MVP. And along that, with Brad Stevens, the smartest mind in all of basketball, in my opinion, he went out and got Kristaps Porzingis, who is a complete mismatch nightmare. Just like I talked about with OKC, forcing teams to guard your center, have their center guard Chet Holmgren. That's what Boston exerted onto other teams. Teams were forced to guard Kristaps Porzingis with centers. As a result, it opens up every single driving lane. The 5-out spacing is immaculate. It makes playmaking way easier when the floor is spread like that. There's not all of these clogged driving lanes. It's a lot easier to see who's actually open. Boston, who doesn't have a true elite playmaking point guard, they were able to win with playmaking by committee. They have a bunch of good players, a bunch of guys who are capable of making reads off of live dribbles. They don't have a Luka Doncic level passer, but what they do have is a bunch of selfless players who can fit together and win games because they fit completely into Joe Mazzulla's style of coaching. Brad Stevens is an absolute genius. I said it a year ago. If you go back to my Celtics preview coming into this season, I said that they were my pick to win the NBA Finals. I said that I love the way that Brad Stevens went out and got Kristaps Porzingis. He perfectly fits what Joe Mazzulla wants to do. And then around that, they have the best defensive backcourt in the league as well. Derek White, Drew Holiday, and they're very different defenders. Drew Holiday, obviously so elite at navigating screens. He's guarding up and down the lineup. At times would guard power forwards, even centers for a little bit. And then also capable of guarding point guards. Guarded Luka Doncic a decent amount in the NBA Finals. Then Derek White, one of the best shot blocking guards in NBA history. This core five, who are going to all be under contract. Jason Tatum's going to sign a massive extension, the biggest in NBA history this offseason. Derek White's going to get extended as well for about 4 years, $130 million. The Celtics are going to blow past the aprons, but the reason they're going to do that is because they're good enough to win championships with an S on the end, plural, This team has the best future in the NBA. They are ahead of everybody in the CBA. I'm going to make a video on that in the future. I think Brad Stevens, I think the Boston Celtics front office is smarter than everybody else in this business. And I think if you look at their decisions, Brad Stevens has yet to lose a trade. He just makes great decision after great decision. Everything he does, everything he touches turns to gold. Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics have the best future in the NBA. They just won a finals. They're in position to win maybe 2 or 3 more over the next 5 years. They have been one of the best teams over the last 6-7 years. You think about all the conference finals runs, 2 finals appearances, 1 finals win. The Boston Celtics are an incredible team, very well built, and they are, in my opinion, no question, the team with the best future moving forward. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you do have any questions or you want to share your thoughts, please comment down below in the comment section. Remember, I want to have some of those healthy debates with you guys, hear your guys' opinions. What teams did I exclude that should have been on this top 10 list? How would you rank them? I could see people saying Orlando should be higher. I could see some people saying Indy should be higher. Obviously, there's going to be maybe a little bit of pushback on someone like Washington and Charlotte, who's still a little bit of a ways away yet, too. I could see that. There's going to be a lot of difference in opinion, which I love. So I'm extremely excited for that. This is, remember, a very difficult exercise and one that is based a lot in projections. It's very subjective as well. So I really hope you guys did enjoy. And remember, things change quickly in the NBA, so you never know. We're one big trade, one big decision from a free agent away from all of this getting turned on its head. So we'll see what this looks like 2-3 weeks from now. I'm extremely excited for that video as well. Hope you guys are. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.